You're listening to Depth Perception, supported by our patrons on Patreon.
Listeners, don't expect us to take this one seriously. This one is for fun. We're going to crack jokes and we're going to poke fun. And we ask you to provide us with some compelling evidence. Don't give me one source. Don't give me footprints. Don't give me anecdotes. Give me evidence, if there is any. Give me 4K video and high definition audio. At least like 160 kbps. Don't give me none of that SoundCloud garbage. Like I want to see the real stuff. If you're convinced, try and convince me. I suppose I should also say, since we're putting things at the beginning of the podcast, we're doing like a Halloween spooktacular. We're doing 5 episodes for 5 weeks, in which we
Darn straight.
In which we tackle things as silly as cryptids to things as weird and complicated as magic and witchcraft.
With a few surprises coming your way too.
Yeah, what we want to do this month. I don't know about Leo. I want to get scared. I want to hear a story that scares me, at least once. I listen to all kinds of podcasts that allege that they're about scary things, but I've never really been scared by a podcast. And I want to try and do that. So we're doing one fun episode. We have to make up for last week, which was no fun. So we're doing one like fun, light, silly time episode that we can have fun with, because we don't speak a ton outside of this. I mean, we do a bit, but this is definitely the bulk of our conversation in a given week. And so this is a fun one. Don't get mad if you're listening.
Yeah.
If you've tuned in live, because you're not going to hear this.
Yeah. Be glad it's not live, okay? That would really be scary.
If you wanna keep us from doing this live, donate to the Patreon, and we won't. The $5 here is we make sure we don't stream this. Welcome to episode 5. This week we're going to be talking about cryptids. It's not going to be a highly structured episode, because we're kind of just going to rip through some of them and talk about the implications of that cryptid existing, and see where that takes us. So we're going to start with Bigfoot, which is a good one. We've talked about Bigfoot before. We had starting in October, we're going to have the appendices go up on Patreon. And the one for the first episode is probably all about Bigfoot, I think. The cool noises from the Missing 411 documentaries. I don't remember which one it was. I think it was the Missing.
I think a good amount of Bigfoot. It was the Hunted, I think.
Yeah, the Hunted. That's the one.
Yeah, that guy really just wanted to make a Bigfoot. Yeah, he wanted to make a Bigfoot documentary. Yeah. You could tell. Yeah,
so he tagged it at the end of the Missing 411. But we did do some research for this week, some light research, some fun stuff that we watched. Bigfoot is a cool one. It's a cool cryptid. There's some big implications if it exists. And there is some really, whatever the opposite word for compelling is, evidence that it does. The Patterson-Gimlin footage is what we used in our research, which is, I think the video is about 3 minutes long. It's just a video of a guy in a costume, and there's lots of cool stories of Bigfoots. There's the Yeti, and the Migo, and the Yowie, and Leo actually had just introduced me to the Wild Men of Europe yesterday or the day before.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about those guys? Because I didn't do any research of my own.
When we did the Mandela Effect podcast, I remember at one point you were saying there isn't really a Bigfoot in Europe, and I said, decided to actually Google it after we recorded, and there isn't a Bigfoot, but there is a wild man, which is like a large, naked man, I think, related to probably various regional legends. I don't really know like what the core of the wild man mythos is. It's not really a important one today, even in like folklore, as far as I can tell. But yeah, there's that. It's just Okay, so kind of an interesting question we could ask is like, is Bigfoot like some kind of man or some kind of ape? And I don't mean like, I'm not saying Bigfoot's real. I'm just saying like if we're gonna even entertain whether or not, like, what the implications of Bigfoot would be, we could maybe start by asking a question like, well, how closely related to us is Bigfoot?
Well, Homo sapiens are a great ape, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
right, so it's really, is Bigfoot just an ape, or is
Bigfoot a man?
Also a man?
Yeah. Or a whole species of men.
Is Bigfoot a man? Sorry, a species, yeah.
Because a lot of these things say, there's either, the story goes that there's either one Bigfoot or there's an entire species that has managed to evade capture, but by all but the clumsiest of Bigfoot hunters, who record crappy videos, or they have dubious tracks that they manage to make prints of, or the coolest stuff is the sounds. As somebody that spent plenty of time in the Scouts, and Leo, you were also in the Scouts, the most compelling thing is audio recordings. Video is stupid. The videos are all lame. Patterson-Gimlin footage is probably the worst of them all. As many crappy videos as I watched tonight, compiling a list of videos to make Leo watch, the Patterson-Gimlin footage is the worst one. I mean, you'll hear about our
Chupacabra or gargoyle, real or fake.
Well, yeah, you'll hear about our misadventures with chupacabras later, but the Patterson-Gimlin footage is just terrible. It doesn't even need to be a Bigfoot. That could just be a guy in a coat. You can't see anything. It just looks like crap. I mean, it looks it looks like George Lucas or something. It doesn't look like a great ape. But the sound recordings are cool. There's really cool ones. They the thing is that you hear all kinds of stuff in the woods, and unless you're like a woodsman, you're not going to know what those sounds are. And that's like the most compelling thing. But all these footprints that you see, or we watched a video courtesy of Destination America about, what was he? The Thunder Brothers?
Thunder Brothers.
The Thunder Brothers. Which is it's not the prog rock band that you thought it was. They're actually just 8 men that live in the forest and scratch bark off trees. I'll definitely put some of these links in the description since I have them handy. But what do you think about that Thunder Brothers video? That was definitely not the sound. It can't be the sound that a hollow tree makes, right? I mean, that sounded like somebody plugging in an amplifier or something.
When they banged on the tree?
Yeah.
To be honest, when I heard them bang on the tree, I thought it sounded like they were banging on a tree. That wasn't. Maybe I missed some kind of dubbed in sound, because I was also talking to you, so it was pretty quiet. Yeah, I was just kind of like, it sounds like they're making a big thing out of zero.
I don't know.
Zilch.
The rock breaking in half was pretty dubious as well, I thought. But maybe that's just me being a skeptic. I don't know. I
think they just picked a crappy rock.
That could be.
Yeah.
I don't know. Those guys were not.
I think it's all like no. I don't think they're
convincing Bigfoot hunters.
I'm not trying to give them credit. I'm just saying that I have my own reasons to think that they're charlatans, and they're just slightly different.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to make sure to post some of these in the description because I think they're worth a watch.
Randy, if I told you that was a real rock, and I told you that they didn't dub any sounds in, I'm sure you would believe.
If you told me that before I watched the video, after I watched the video and formulated my own opinion, no, I don't buy it. I think there's like cool stuff that is like that video. Hellier is like that video, but so much more cool because those guys aren't taking what they're doing seriously. They're, what is a camouflage t-shirt going to do if you're wearing blue jeans? Like, what is that going to do? That's the thing about any cryptid hunter is they're so obviously not even trying to create an illusion that they're doing serious work. And I have never heard of Destination America before this evening. Bigfoot himself, herself, or itself is cool. It's a cool thing. There's some big implications if it does exist, which I don't think it. I'm not convinced that it does. I don't believe that it does, because there's no way that a species of monkey or ape has been roaming the jungles of the Pacific Northwest or wherever else that it is, and there's never been one captured. There's no
Right.
Bigfoot
How do we even...
skin that somebody's made a rug out of. There's nothing. Footprints aren't good enough. I can make fake footprints, and they'll be just as convincing as anything you'd find. The only thing I lack is the plaster to make a mold with.
Even if you start going through the list and you say, okay, Bigfoot's real. Okay, how did Bigfoot get there? Bigfoot must have gotten to North America a long ass time ago, because the only other hominids, not the hominids, the only other primate in America like got there on like plant matter, like mats probably that floated from Africa. So like you have to have some kind of way that Bigfoot got there. You have to have some kind of theory about how closely related Bigfoot is to other hominids. But you can't even begin to do that kind of speculation without any physical evidence. And there's zero physical evidence, which I think, incidentally, is why Bigfoot gets pushed in, as they did on Hellier. Like, gets pushed in with, like...
Oh, was Bigfoot on Hellier?
And things like Mothman. I think that at some point they kind of, like, alluded to the idea that, like, Bigfoot could be some kind of alien. I don't think it wasn't a big thing. But
why would...
Yeah, like the guy saying that he heard Bigfoot's in the cave or something, crying. It's just like anything that you have no physical evidence for has to be like, it all kind of gets pushed together into one thing, and so there's some of that going on.
Yeah. The closest thing that is verifiably real that harkens to Bigfoot is Australopithecus, which is an extinct great ape. Mm-hmm. Unless one single Australopithecus was immortal, or unless all of them, except for the ones that were kilt violent, like the elves. So unless that is a species of great ape that was immortal, because it has to be immortal. If there's only one, it has to be immortal. And if there's an entire species of them, where are they all? Where are all of them? Why don't you... There's nobody that's ever gotten real hard evidence of a tribe or a community of Bigfoot, big feet. There's nobody. There's nothing. Photos, don't ever show me a photo of a Bigfoot, because I don't believe you. Show me the Bigfoot. Put him in a museum. I don't care if you have to kill him. At that point, that's like, if there's a species of great ape besides humankind that lives in the Americas or anywhere else in the world that has evaded capture into the 21st century, then kill as many of them as you need to fill a museum exhibit full of them, because the world needs to know. But until then, like, Bigfoot is just garbage, and I can't believe the stuff that we get fed as Bigfoot evidence. The most interesting thing remains the sounds, but as far as anything else, I think Bigfoot is lame.
Tell you what I want to get fed as Bigfoot evidence. Bigfoot meat. Bigfoot chowder.
Yeah, I've seen Faces of Death. People eat simians. Where's the Bigfoot meat? Because if binging with Babish has taught me anything, it's that you can buy any kind of meat you want. So where is it?
Well, I haven't gone on the dark web.
Yeah, but if you buy Bigfoot meat on the dark web, you're definitely buying human meat, and at that point, you're just begging for. I was gonna say Wilkes Crier disease. What is it? What is the people version of that prion disease?
I don't know.
Oh,
I have
okay.
no idea what you're talking about. I'm sorry.
Whatever. Mad cow disease. It's people mad cow disease. What is it? Now I have to know.
I don't know. I think that's what Jordan Peterson has. I'm probably gonna cut that. I can't keep.
Well, I'm certainly not going to cut it. Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease
Oh.
is like the people version of mad cow disease.
Jordan Peterson got that disease because he ate what he thought was Bigfoot meat after ordering it on the intellectual dark web.
See, that is enough. That's all you need to know to tell you not to listen to Jordan Peterson, is that he really thought that he was buying Bigfoot meat from the dark web. That motherfucker ate human meat. He ate human meat.
He's on an all meat diet. Gets old.
Probably. I wonder if he fed Joe Rogan any of his Bigfoot meat too.
I think you can see a change in Joe Rogan after.
That's probably what made him move into that crappy new studio that looks like he's in Snoke's throne room.
I haven't seen it. I'm not gonna see it.
Okay. You're not gonna see The Last Jedi?
I'm not gonna see. No, I'm not gonna see Joe Rogan's new studio. I've gone this long without finding out the end of How I Met Your Mother. I've gone this long. I also went like a year without finding out.
I don't know the beginning of How I Met Your Mother.
Well, it's okay. It's okay. It's not that big of a deal anymore. But the point is that I still don't know what happens. I've seen everything except for the last episode. At this point,
our cultural cachet is just dripping.
Yeah,
away.
it's dripping away. We don't have any kind of.
We've
pan
already
to catch
said
the
we can't
drippings.
do a Lost podcast.
No. You folks are the pan. You folks are the pan that catches our drippings. So go to our Patreon.
Yeah, pay us $1 million a week. That way I won't have to work 30 minutes a day to be able to put food on the table for my family. Back to the real podcast. I want this episode to stand as a challenge to any and all listeners who believe that they have what it takes to convince me of a cryptid. Those Bigfoot sounds that I talked about from Missing 411. They're really cool. They're really cool noises, but on their own, they're not enough to convince me of a Bigfoot. What they are what they are able to do is convince me that the woods are scary at night. And that's cool. That's really cool. I love that the woods are scary. I'm glad that there's something in the 21st century that can scare me.
Yeah.
But it's not evidence of a Bigfoot. So some enterprising listener, pick any one of the cryptids that we talk about today and give me something convincing. Make me, at least for a minute, believe that one of these things exists. Give me the good stuff. Send me to whatever forum that there is that has the real, like, juicy information about these guys. And I will give it an honest to God look. But I swear to God, if anybody links me to a Destination America video, I'm banning you from the podcast.
We don't want your money.
I'm going to pay you not to listen to the podcast.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
So what are you going to say?
I was going to say... I was just going to say... I was going to say, please also, we were trying to find weird cryptids that we haven't heard about, and it's hard to find things that haven't been pooped all over by just entirely too gullible people. And
Leo found better ones than I did.
Maybe you think that, but give me an example. Oh, the monkey
The
man?
monkey man. The monkey man's cooler than any of them, right?
I didn't even read. I sent you the Wikipedia article, and then we fussed over how to pronounce it, and I did not read it. I have no idea. All I know is that he's immortal.
Yeah. I read in the first paragraph that he was immortal, and that's all I needed to know. That's what primed my Bigfoot theory that if there's just one, he's immortal. Unless he's
immortal, and he's also a master of mirrors.
Maybe he buds like a potato. Maybe that's how he reproduces.
Bigfoot is one of those things that I'm glad exists as folklore, and is really cool. And the more that I try to like convince myself that Bigfoot is real, the less cool Bigfoot is.
It's one of those things that gets cooler the further back the source dates from. The older the source is, the cooler it is. The problem is, there's you have even less evidence for those. There's even less evidence because they didn't have audio recording equipment unless they were going to literally put Bigfoot on wax. They didn't have the video cameras. Why? Where is all the footage of Bigfoot? Everybody has like a 4K camera in their pocket. Where is it? Where's the high def good footage of a Bigfoot? Hell, I bet my phone records better audio than this microphone does. Where is it? But if you know where it is, send it to me. We put our email in the description. So why don't we go on to the Thunderbird and the Phoenix?
I was also gonna say we should go on.
I want to cap off with the Wendigo and the Mothman.
Yes. Okay. Let's talk about old Thundy. What's a Thunderbird?
What is a Thunderbird?
Also known as actually just a California condor.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what a Thunderbird is. It's a big buzzard from the west.
There's nothing else. There was that Did you watch the video, Leo, about the Tombstone Thunderbird? AKA the pterodactyl?
No.
Oh, well, why don't you navigate yourself over to the doc and just click on that video so you can see the thumbnail. Just click on the link there.
Tombstone Thunderbird?
Yeah.
How did I miss that?
I'm sure you were doing your best not to miss out on all this ridiculous shit. Just look at the thumbnail and tell me that isn't just a photoshopped image of a dinosaur. From an age when Photoshop was even easier than it is now.
That was such a funny dramatization. These people are pointing with their guns like, look!
Yeah, those are just the original version of the Destination America crew. The mountain monsters or whatever it was.
I love it how there's giant like wanted poster like lettering. Like saloon.
Oh, I didn't watch the video. I saw I just looked at the thumbnail and put the link in.
And they give you half a second of an image of the pterodactyl without font over it. I think they know how stupid the idea that this photo is old is hilarious.
So again, we're back to the implication that either these guys killed the one and only Thunderbird, and every sighting after that is crap, or in
this case, Thunderbird is literally pterodactyl also.
Yeah, literally a pterodactyl. As seen in the movie Dinosaurs. So either they killed the one and only, and every sighting since then is bunk, and is, in fact, the California condor. Or there is an entire goddamn species of pterodactyls that lives in our world that we just don't know about. They've managed to evade all capture except for that. Or they've killed the only one, and the rest of them are just condors. More interesting even than the Thunderbird is the Phoenix, which is more than any other cryptid that I can think of. Just doesn't make any sense. It's cool as a part of legend. You know, what is it, Greek?
Yeah.
Or something?
Yes.
Yeah. It's really, really cool as a part of Greek myth. I really like Phoenix's Titan in Final Fantasy. It doesn't make any sense as a real animal.
Even in the Greek legend, I think of it as a thing most of the time. Like, when you think about it in the context of, like, burning up and then being reborn out of its ashes, like, it's cool as a symbol that doesn't really exist in any particular
it's like a symbol of a civilization or something.
Yeah, it's right. It's like it's a symbol that represents many things, but like it doesn't really it doesn't. It barely works in a story, like at least in its sort of like its fleshed out form. How can it function as an
As a
actual
literal
animal?
element in a story, it doesn't make
Yeah.
sense. Yeah. If we were talking before the show today, and it fills no niche, it doesn't make any sense. For what benefit would an animal just be able to be on
No.
fire?
So we got people out here on YouTube that are like,
Um,
"Oh, did you see that bird in this? You see that bird in this video? It's shiny. That's a phoenix. It's bursting into flames." First of all, no, you idiot. A phoenix wouldn't burst into flames while flying. While it's on the hunt, it would go and do it somewhere quietly, where it could be alone, and where its babies. If a phoenix is gonna burst into flames in the sky, that means it's gonna turn into ash in the sky. That means its tiny babies, which which are hatchlings at this point, are just gonna fall and perish.
and and how many? Once again, I'm gonna ask this about every single one of these damn things. How many are there?
How many are
How
there?
many phoenixes are there?
None. If that's how they get
Is it
birth.
just the one? Well, none is also the correct answer.
Yes.
But
Good to remind our listeners. Yes.
yeah, but it just, as a creature, as a living animal, it makes no sense. There are plenty of animals that we look at and we think that doesn't make any sense, but they make sense really. You know,
The giraffe.
the anteater,
The
or the
anteater.
giraffe. The giraffe is,
Didn't need to.
at least they were able to make a successful TV show out of the anteater.
That's true.
But like a giraffe is just a crazy animal that on the surface level doesn't make any sense until you realize that trees get tall. You know, but the phoenix and the thunderbird even, if the thunderbird is a pterodactyl, where the hell are the rest of them? Where are all the pterodactyls? How did any of them survive? Are they immortal? All of these creatures have to be immortal because, well, I suppose the chupacabra doesn't have to be immortal considering it's got a terrible disease, terrible affliction. But the Sasquatch, the Thunderbird doesn't have to be immortal because it is just a regular bird that you could probably see him at every zoo on the West Coast. But the Phoenix, it doesn't make any sense. What niche does it fill in the wild? Because there's no superfluous animals in the wild. So what is the Phoenix if it's real? What is the purpose of it being on fire if it's real? How many are there? Like that's one of the things about this is like you've got to be able to answer my questions. If you're gonna post these videos and if you're gonna tout that any of these creatures are real, you got to be able to answer my questions and you got to be able to back it up somehow. You know, the answer itself is not enough to satisfy, you know, the question. Like, where is incontrovertible evidence of any one cryptid that isn't just actually an animal? Now the chupacabra is, I wish I could even guess at what that means in Spanish. We mostly played silent ball in my Spanish class.
I think it means like suck goat or something like that.
Does it just mean goat sucker? Because that's what people always call it as well. So it's supposed to be like a vampire, right? It is meant to be like a canid or a feline vampire. They always seem to be represented as hairless. I've never seen a super furry one, which does lend itself to the correct answer of mange. But they're identified by the two pricks they tend to leave in the marks or in the necks of their alleged animal victims. Which I heard explained yesterday in a little bit of light research as exactly what coyotes do. Chupacabras are totally made up. They are absolute fiction. It they're just creepy. They're just creepy looking real animals. There's no great mystery about the chupacabra. Um, all the footage is crap. I I have not since I was a child have I been even remotely convinced of a chupacabra.
That's exactly what I was also gonna say. Is
Like
I remember trying to convince
that's
myself that they were real and failing.
cryptids are cryptids are interesting, right? Follow me on this. Cryptids are interesting because they're not scary as a kid, right? They're magical as a kid.
Mm.
At least in my perception of them, they're like exactly the same thing as a unicorn when I'm a kid. Um, in theory, as an adult, cryptids should be super scary because they defy your perception of the natural world. The qualities that get applied to them are seemingly unnatural. They don't match what is expected of life on this planet, right? And you'd think that would make them more scary, but the reality is that the evidence is so hokey. Um, the footage is so hokey. The pictures are crap. The is It's almost as if the History Channel went out of their way to make sure you're not scared of them. But they could have been scary. And the chupacabra could be the scariest one of all. If it were actually a vampire, it would be the scariest thing in the world. Unfortunately, it just isn't. I mean, can you think of a can you think of any way for the chupacabra, you know, to you now? Can you imagine a way for the chupacabra to become anything other than like you having sympathy for a sick animal? Like, do you believe that you could ever be convinced of the chupacabra as being anything
As
other
being
than
real. Well, it real in the sense of like material, 100% no. Um,
yeah, because it's like I said, like the world goes out of its way to make sure we're not scared of these things. That should really, if like these stories should scare us, but people like waste our time with crap.
there's there's something to be. Some of these stories, there's cool interpretations of things like, um, Fey folk and like, and I guess things like the Mothman, where people sort of enter these like weird liminal zones and have these experiences, and it's like I don't believe that they're real in like a physical way, but I think that when you start opening your mind to like this cryptid is real and this cryptid is real, you kind of have to put them all into that framework of like there's a liminal zone maybe you drift into it in a similar way to how you might drift into a mystical experience, and you have this strange experience, and then you're kind of back, um, that kind of experience is always subject to reframing in rationalist terms. And there's people who will say like, well, if you reframe it in rationalist terms and you say, oh, it's a, there's a rationally what's going on is something psychological. Okay, so now you're in a psychological framework, and but because you're also in a rational framework, you can't say like, oh, psychologically something that's happening is, there's something happening that's real. You have to distinguish that type of psychological reality in that moment from like a sort of an overarching reality. And when you do that, you definitely are removing the magic. And there's people that will say, well, you shouldn't do that, because if you're gonna give this kind of experience a chance to have meaning, you disadvantage it by forcing it into like our world, like forcing it to sort of like be a sub type of like experience in a rational world. Um, so I think that is that's a conversation we can have. Like, are there certain types of experiences that are better left sort of in the raw? If you're going to have a meaningful experience, maybe you shouldn't be trying. Maybe you shouldn't be trying to explain it away. But also, some of these are just so like the chupacabra. I don't see this being something that like someone's gonna like encounter a chupacabra and be like, oh well, don't tell me that was just in my head or whatever. Like that was like an important like I don't think people are going out and like having important experiences with chupacabras is what I'm saying. And honestly, until that starts to happen, I'm not really gonna care like who saw a chupacabra or where or when or under what circumstances or what evidence they had.
When I was a kid and I was out in the woods, if I heard a scary noise, my first thought was always, it was always Bigfoot, or it was always Chupacabra, or it was always something like that.
Some kind of horror pressing in.
Just because, yeah,
Well, for
yeah,
me,
but
anyways.
the older that I get, the more the worry becomes like, oh my god, is that a mountain lion? Is that a bear? Like, I've been so turned off of these cryptids that like, my imagination isn't free to like wander to them as an explanation for anything. Like at this point, I'd rather run into a Bigfoot in the woods than a mountain lion.
Yeah, the hokiness is really a part what makes it harder to believe, which is I think why something like a fairy has more appeal. Not because like fairies
Definitely.
in the children's book kind of fairies are I think a lot less hokey than like a chupacabra or even a Bigfoot. But I mean, like finding out a little bit about like some of the mythos around fairies, like and sort of like the finding out like as an adult like that there's like that the tradition of fairies is like a lot different from what I thought it was as a kid makes me think like the fact that it's remote to me makes it more compelling and more interesting.
Yeah, we'll tackle this more in depth next week, I imagine. But things that have a magical explanation are, whether you believe them or not, they're so much more interesting and evocative and provocative than stories about cryptids, because you can be at least I can be convinced of something that I perceive as magical having actually happened than I could ever be convinced that what I'm hearing in the woods isn't just like the mating call of some animal that I've never heard make noise before.
Mm-hmm.
Like I go up to we spend some time at your family's beach house every now and again, and the bullfrogs creep me out all the time because I don't ever hear bullfrogs around here. In my day-to-day life, I never hear bullfrogs. But like a couple evenings every summer, I go to a place that I don't spend much time at all, and I hear noises that are unfamiliar to me. And I'm never quite satisfied with bullfrogs as an explanation. Just because they're unfamiliar to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like the space that cryptids could occupy. Is something in the back of your mind that doesn't occur to you until the worst possible time. But instead, I'm when I hear something creepy like bullfrogs, I'm never gonna think, gosh, what if that is a scary animal? Because the world has done its level best to make cryptids not be scary by constantly making us look at the schlockiest stuff.
You know what? I'll tell you what. One thing I'm not going to go do. I'm not going to go outside with like a spirit rattle in the dark and sit and call a spirit, because
what is a spirit?
I don't know. I don't know if that's the right term, but I've heard it talked about.
But you can keep talking. You can keep doing your thing. I'm just interested. I'm gonna Google.
Yeah, spirit rattle.
So what were you saying?
I'm not going to go sit in the dark with a spirit rattle because Because I'm not part of a tradition where that's a thing, but also because the idea of sitting out and like calling a presence alone is still too close to the feeling of terror of the night pressing in that I used to feel as a kid. And I think that's probably overall a negative thing. The fact that like we're told like our like fear of the dark is built up and reinforced by like stories that make us more afraid. I think it's probably not a thing that in the end is doing us any favors when there's like much more responsible and nuanced ways to like get a kid to learn to be cautious in the dark outside at night. But because I've grown up with that, like the most I'm content to do is like maybe play with a Ouija board with my friends, or or do some kind of magical ritual with some people that like have some experience. But I'm not going to go out and sit and just like with no experience do something like that. I could, and maybe it would be fine and I would learn something from it, but there's times in my life when the night, like the dark outside, just doesn't feel like a settled enough place. I mean, even just like in the dark in my basement, sometimes I still get this feeling that I've had all the way back since I was a kid of like, better start running and just I'll run up the stairs. You know what I mean?
Well, exactly. I was just gonna say that like because of the way that things are represented, whether it's if it's in the media or if it's just media, like in whether it's the news or in television or movies or anything, like for me, being in the dark in my house is scarier. I've spent most of my life. I've spent all of my life in two residences. My place that I used to live in and my parents' house. Mm-hmm. And in 24 years, I have not gotten used to the house sounds that my parents' house makes. I didn't get used to the creepy noises that would happen around my apartment at night. Like I said, just because like you're constantly thinking of home invasion, or you read the story about like somebody had an old woman that lived in their attic and came out at night to drink soda and eat their food, and things like that. The dark of the house can be more scary and more eerie and more unsettling than what's the worst I'm going to run into in the woods is like I'm pretty scared of moths, but like what am I going to run into? Like I'm so much more worried about getting gored by a stag or something than I am about ripped in half by a Bigfoot. Like just because of all the crap, Chewbacca is enough to make me not scared of the Bigfoot, because he became 50 years ago he was just like a big furry guy that ran around with my favorite space pirate. We got to keep this one fun. And what's more fun than the Mothman?
There's
right.
There's nothing more fun than the Mothman.
That's what we're going to be going to next is the Mothman. The greatest, the most shapely ass in all of cryptids.
That's true.
If you've ever seen that statue.
And that definitely most and best legs as well.
Oh well, my God, statue, most and best.
But just more broadly.
He's the David of cryptids. Mothman is the worst. Mothman is the absolute worst. I have less interest in the Mothman than I do in any other cryptid.
The moth, the myth, the legend. I'm sorry.
And I said just moments ago that I am scared of moths. I am scared of moths. In real life, when I see a moth, I kind of freak out. And it gets worse the closer they get to me. Moths, to me, are like eldritch, almost. Like, a big creepy moth is the closest I've ever been to Lovecraftian horror in my real life. I can't exactly identify what it is.
Some of them don't have mouths. That's pretty scary.
Oh, don't say things like that. Don't say things like that. Gosh. Ugh.
I catch moths in my hands.
Don't say stuff like that.
I love moths. There's something
Don't
that you
say
need to know is that Randy and I are firmly on opposite sides of the moth binary. The
I had
pro
a
con. The yes no.
I came home from work late one night, and I live in the country, so there's porch lights instead of street lights. There was as I was going to the door, a moth flew and landed on my lip, and I threw up all over the porch. Moths, as insects, if they are insects and not celestial beings, are really freaky to me for a couple of reasons. First and foremost among them now is that some of them have no mouths. That's really freaky. But the second is they're kind of like like upside down butterflies. You were talking you were telling me about Stranger Things, and so I watched an episode, and it reminded me of the other couple of episodes that I've watched. But they're like butterflies of the upside down. They're like Bizarro World butterflies, right? To me, they are like really creepy. They congregate around light, which is like, that to me is like pretty Lovecraftian. They're like they're nocturnal creatures that are drawn to the light. Like, moths themselves to me like have that kind of eldritch essence to them. Whereas Mothman, once again, it's because of what the world does to Mothman. It's not because Mothman couldn't be scary. I mean, this is another thing that I'll post in the description. But there's that story of the Crimean War that I read to Leo before the recording tonight. Essentially, what happened is, according to that story, at least, I'm not going to report it as fact because I don't know. But essentially, on the Ides of March, some Russian soldiers during the Crimean War had planned to ignore a ceasefire and ambush a Turkish encampment nearby. And they cited the guy who survived. He called it a crow, but the story calls it the Mothman. But it's essentially the 5 men that were going to do this ambush had set out from their camp, and at about the halfway point on their way to the enemy camp, they spotted this Mothman, and they were like disoriented, and so they turned around. They got turned around, and went to make an attack on what wound up being their own base, their own camp. And some of the soldiers that wound up firing on them at their camp, they reported that these men returned not in their like standard issue uniforms, but in turbans and robes, and followed by a mass of bats. Like, if that's the only story I had heard of the Mothman, I'd be so happy with that. That'd be like the creepiest thing in the world. That these soldiers saw something that disoriented them. Because another thing I have about moths is it's because of Pokemon, but I associate them with like poisoning and confusing, which is just total Pokemon crap. I mean, I'm sure are there moths that like have poison dust on their wings or whatever?
I don't think so.
It can't be real.
Maybe there's moths that have dust that
but it's something I associate with them. Well, like, I always think of it as spores because, again, it's like something that Pokemon did to me, because somehow a single Pokemon is more scary to me than the Mothman. But, you know, because I have these associations that I make with moths And, the Mothman, despite only being called the Mothman because they couldn't call him Batman, which is, as far as I can tell, actually true. He's only called the Mothman because the name Batman was already taken. Because of associations that I make with moths, Mothman he's almost there. He's almost scary. But then the stories turn to, well, he doesn't cause these disasters. He's there to warn us about these disasters. Right? He is like benevolent or
at least somehow a byproduct of like there being
what do you mean?
An imminent disaster.
Right, like he's an augur. Like
yeah, exactly.
It's another thing of the very people who are trying to like spread the Mothman, the myth of the moth. They make it less scary because they keep adding on elements which, for all their addition, it only works to subtract from the actual essence of the thing that could be scary.
Mm-hmm.
It is a total bummer that people saw fit to like make cute Mothman plushies or make a Mothman statue with a hilariously perfect ass, and put it in the middle of a street in some stupid town wherever the hell. That was probably the most embarrassed I ever got for Hellier, was when they went and stopped at that Mothman ass statue.
That was such a synchronicity.
Yeah, even for all their talk about synchronicities and was his name Tucker? Is that the guy?
I don't know, Trundlebed. I can't remember.
The first time
Jeremy?
in a decade I've wanted to beat somebody up.
The one dude went to that other town in like Minnesota, and he was like, "There's some eerie similarities here," and there's like a moth statue, and there's like a bridge, and it's like,
yeah, like this is what I'm getting at, is that when I already have like a completely irrational fear of moths, when Mothman can be introduced and kept as not like a kindly figure or a goofy sculpture or something. Like, Mothman could be scary. Mothman could be scary as a portent of disaster. I wish they let him be. I don't even have all the questions about Mothman that I had about the Sasquatch, or that I had about Chupacabras or the Thunderbird or the Phoenix. I don't,
Yeah.
there doesn't need to be more than one, because like it's the story of like, oh, he originated at like, what was it, like a toxic waste dump or something. Like, that's plenty. That's
it's basically like superhero lore, right?
Yeah. Like, it might as well be like a nuclear test site that he emerged from.
All of the cryptids that we've talked about, I don't believe that any of them hold any water. I mean, even in a symbolic way, even in a like altered state of reality kind of way. But all of them are like distinctly different in some way. Bigfoot, is, evocative of like Neanderthals and like, or just like
he's
sort of like the
human.
unknown. Right. He's right. Like he's like this.
He's
unknown
like the wild
figure.
aspect of humanity.
Right. That we even see in ourselves sometimes when we meet a stranger or see a stranger from, so like there's all these cool ways in which Bigfoot as an idea could have been built up over time in a pretty natural way. Just
Maybe those Destination America guys were actually Bigfoots and they were trying to throw us off the trail.
I think they were. I think that they were the Thunder Brothers.
I keep forgetting about that name.
with banging on the tree. Like it's all there. It's a clue. When the two headlamps look like moth eyes, it's all
Yeah,
there.
they were doing what they do to throw us off the scent. Oh,
Yep, exactly. That's their whole thing. You couldn't call it a shtick. It's their mission. So there's that, right? Um, Thunderbirds, Thunderbirds are big birds.
mm.
Phoenix is like a symbolic image more than it is even really a story in terms of how how it's like even in Harry Potter when they show the like Phoenix.
Keep it out of stories. Don't use it. Like, let it be a symbol.
Yes, agreed. Exactly. Exactly. And then, I mean, Chupacabra is just like people getting worked up about coyotes. There's not really much more that needs to be said there. And maybe some like older legends getting mixed in.
Yeah, you don't need to. You don't
Or
need to be
influencing it.
afraid of the chupacabra, because you can't. You could just be afraid of coyotes.
You know what's crazy about coyotes?
No.
If you suppress coyote populations in an area by like killing them off by culling them, coyotes, which normally give like very small litters, I can't remember if it's one or two.
They probably. I
pups
mean, they start to
every
give huge
season.
litters, right?
We'll give exactly yeah. So yeah, so like that's pretty cool. It's kind of Hydro like, you know what I mean? So
Yeah. But here's the thing. Here,
but
you can continue after I say this, because you've made me realize something.
I don't need to keep going
Okay,
on
well,
about
then
it.
don't.
Yeah, go ahead.
I will. And by continue, I mean I'll
Hate
start.
this podcast.
Yeah, we're done. Forget 5 weeks of Spooktown. We're done. We're going back to politics. Back when the podcast was fun.
Back when people care what we had to say.
Yeah. So here's something I want to say that I didn't think when I said the thing that I said earlier about how these cryptids don't fill a niche in the wild. If we forget about the things that make me think that Mothman is ridiculous, if we forget about him being like treated as like a savior of humanity, or get rid of the injured cold crap, get rid of any thought that he might be an alien or anything, like let him be like a monster created like Dr. Manhattan after a nuclear accident or a TNT explosion or some garbage. Like that's the thing that works about him, is that he doesn't need to be explainable as a wild animal. Doesn't need to be. He can just be weird. He can be like, have you ever heard about the frequency that's supposed to like be associated with people seeing ghosts and having like like there's supposed to be this frequency that like makes your eyes vibrate just subtly, and it's supposed to explain things like ghosts and things like this. Like he can be like, the Mothman can be like a sympathetic reaction of the mind to disaster. Like, people definitely can think, or have the notion of something happening before it happens, and we can associate Mothman with that. And he can be scary. He can be scary because of that. Like, he's scarier as a hallucination or as like a sign from the world. But tear that damned statue down. Because it's never going to make... Like, I can never do anything but laugh at the Mothman when I can just go look at pictures of his ass on Google. Like, let the Mothman be scary. I want to talk about the Wendigo, because forget about this stupid video that I didn't even watch, because in the first episode, Leo made me watch a bunch of crazy shitty videos that he didn't watch, and so now I got to make him watch a bunch of shitty videos that I didn't watch. And the Wendigo, as long as I don't misunderstand, is so cool and dope and excellent. Do you know anything at all about the Wendigo?
I listened to a Weird Studies episode about the Wendigo, and I've heard about Wetikos, which is a related word.
Well, was that about the story of the Wendigo?
Yeah, it was mostly about
Okay.
that.
I have not listened to that, and I would love to. Isn't that by Algernon Blackwood?
Yes.
Yeah. I will have to. I might even listen to that after this. But I know of the Wendigo courtesy of the very good video game Until Dawn. And if that, since that is all I know of the Wendigo, I get to have like the cool idea of what the Wendigo is, and I'm glad that we only know of the Wendigo each from one source so that we can compare notes in real time. So what I know of the Wendigo is that it is bred of cannibalism. It is like the spirit of the Wendigo is unleashed when somebody chooses to eat another person, and not that they do it out of like avarice, but that they choose, because like in the game, spoilers for a 6-year-old game, in the game, these twin sisters go missing from their friend group, and one of them winds up dead, and the other one winds up alive but trapped in like a crevasse with her sister's corpse, and she buries her sister, but she winds up digging her up and having to eat her because she's starving. And so the Wendigo spirit is released, and it's like such a cool thing. If that's actually anything to do with the actual legend of the Wendigo, it's like a very cool warning against cannibalism. It doesn't, like, the Wendigo doesn't have to be any scarier than a cannibal to be really scary. It doesn't have to be a monster. It can just be a person that's really scary because they eat people.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, there's a whole like conversation to be had about why it's scary for people to eat people. When, I wouldn't think twice about like a praying mantis eating another praying mantis, but there's something scary about it when it's people. There's something scary about it with gerbils too. I had gerbils, and the daddy gerbil ended up eating the baby gerbils, or maybe God only knows. It could have been the mother gerbil. I couldn't tell the difference at the time. I was a tiny little child. But there is like something freaky about a person eating a person. And that is enough. There doesn't need to be anything else. Like, all the Wendigo has to be is a cannibal for it to be totally scary and fucked up. And something that you're able to dissociate from normal life, to the point where like if I'm back in Highland Forest for a scout some year after I've had half a dozen children and I make them be a venture crew, like if I'm out in the woods and I run into a cannibal, like, who's to say that I perceive them as being the same as anybody else except that they eat people? There's something inherently scary about it, and I'm super interested in hearing what Algernon Blackwood has to say about the Wendigo. If you remember it all?
If I'm to do this, I'm gonna be telling you a summary of the story of what Weird Studies summarized about the story, because I've not read the story, so I'm not gonna dwell too long on this. Okay, so in that book, the Wendigo is like this kind of monster that seeks out and possesses people when it's invoked.
Does it have anything at all to do with cannibalism, or is it like a summoning? So it's like a summoning?
I don't know. I don't really know if it does. I don't think it does. It possesses somebody in the story, and it affects him poorly, but I don't think it goes after. I don't think he then goes and eats people.
This is one that I don't actually have any knowledge of outside of that video game,
Yeah.
and that you don't seem to have any knowledge of outside of that story.
What I do have a little bit of knowledge of is this. I know that there's another transliteration of the word, which is Wetiko, and I've heard that term used to talk about this sort of cannibalistic spirit affecting people in more of a metaphorical way. And there's many scholars, including one called Jack Douglas Forbes, I'm reading Wikipedia right now. So anyway, so Jack D. Forbes is a Native American writer, scholar, and political activist who has used the idea of the Wetiko to, I guess, a critique of colonization, conquest, and capitalism. So that's actually the first time I heard about the Wendigo/Wetiko was in that context, as sort of like a term for like a devouring white person.
There is a certain cachet that Indigenous American folklore has. At least with me, it's, you know, I hope it's construed in the way that I mean it and not the way that it sounds. But there is, like, you know, tradition has a lot to do with how compelling a story about a cryptid is.
Yes.
And you know, I wouldn't say that like when it becomes shitty is when the tradition is co-opted, right? That's the thing that's wrong with the Thunderbird. When I looked up the Thunderbird on YouTube, and just the word Thunderbird is all I looked up. Like, I wanted to have like as pure a search as I could. And one of the first videos I found had a friggin' thumbnail with a pterodactyl in it. Like, that's when it becomes hard. And the thing that is cool about the Wendigo is that it hasn't been polluted for me. Like, yeah. I have very bare bones idea about it. It, like, just in the same way that Mothman could be cool if he was just a symbol or a sign or, you know, an augur. Like, the Wendigo is cool in the way that Mothman could be, because it's never been associated with something lame in my mind. Like, skinwalkers are the same way. Another, I believe, largely Navajo concept, the skinwalker is. I could be wrong about that.
I think that's right.
But that's definitely what my memory says, but my memory is notoriously shaky. Yeah, there's just like...
Yeah.
Or it's the same thing about, like, Australia is another one where, like, you know, I guess it's because of Steve Irwin that I have a particular image of Australians in my head. But, like, the story of the Pelega Princess is, like, super scary, even though, you know, none of the information can really be corroborated or anything, because it's the closest I've ever been to hearing about the Yowie. It's, like, is monolithic the word I'm looking for? It, like, stands for the Yowie in my mind. Like, this one story that is covered over like 4 minutes on a radio show is the only thing I've ever read about, heard about the Yowie, and nothing else. And so it's like uncorrupted, and it stands for the entire concept in my mind. And that's what the thing is with the Wendigo, and that's where, like, I could be there with Mothman. I could be there with Sasquatch, and I could be there with the Chupacabra. I couldn't be there with the Thunderbird because, I mean, come on, it's just a big bird. Come on, it's like what I said about the reptilians in the in the Mandela Effect episode. Like, who cares? Like, if it's like a bird that has thunder power and it can, like, shoot lightning bolts at me, like, that's cool. That'd be really cool. That'd be tight. but it's not that. It's just a big bird. Everything I've ever read about it says it's just a big bird. And there's all kinds of big birds. There's a million of them.
Yeah, Sesame Street.
Yeah. Probably the scariest one, actually, is from Sesame Street.
Yeah.
I'm sure I wouldn't say that if I was staring a condor in the face, but I've never done that.
Or if you were staring Big Bird in the face, probably. He's so sensitive.
It wouldn't be easy, that's for sure. But these are all things that could be scary if people would just lay off and let them be conceptual. Let them be things that, like, creep into your mind when you're already unsettled. Like, Bigfoot is the thing that if I was scared out in the woods because I heard a noise, Bigfoot would be the thing I use to make me, like, giggle and say, like, oh, this isn't a big deal at all. It's probably just Bigfoot.
Here's a take. All these things that you were afraid of when you were little, the reason that they can't hurt you is because adults have made them not scary. If we didn't make Bigfoot into a goofy, hokey myth, Bigfoot would be real.
Thank you for listening to Depth Perception. You can support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel, kicking us a little bit of scratch on Patreon.